He isn't much in the eyes of the world, he'll never make history. No, he isn't much in the eyes of the world, but he is the world to me. My dad. Now here is a man. To me, he is everything strong. No, he can't do wrong. My dad. My dad. Now he understands. When I bring him troubles to share, oh, he's always there, my dad. When I was small, I felt 10 feet tall. When I walked by his side, and everyone would say that's his son, and my heart would burst with pride. My dad, oh, I love him so, and I only hope that someday my own son will say, my dad. Now here is a man.
We're going to try and honor Dad through his memory and things like that today. So no sadness. We're going to be happy. We're going to remember Grandpa in a positive, happy way. He lived a long life. He made a lot of accomplishments and everything. And so I want to share some of those with you today. But since Dad was a God-fearing man, I would ask his grandson and my nephew Jeremy to please give an opening prayer.
Dear Heavenly Father, I just praise and thank you this day. I thank you for the life that he lived, the family we have now because of him. God, I pray that you'd go with us from here and bless us and bless this time we're sharing together. In your name, amen.
Amen.
Thanks, Jeremy. I'm going to talk a little bit about Dad's early history today and kind of stop around, after we were all here, because we mostly all have our memories, and I'll invite you guys to share some memories a little bit later. But first I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the things that Dad did when he was young. He was born on July 31st, 1924, and Calvin Coolidge was president at that time. During his 94 years on Earth, Dad had 16 presidents to gripe at. And he died fittingly, as you'll hear, on Veterans Day. So I couldn't think of a better way to begin. But since many of you knew him in his later years, I'll kind of focus on the first part, as I said. Dad was born in Bennington, near Omaha, Nebraska, to Della and Henry Palke. And there's a book over there which shows some of the family heritage, a little photo book. His folks operated a small family farm in the central easternmost part of the state of Nebraska, kind of a high plains area. Dad's paternal grandparents, Rose and Henry Palke, came from Germany, and his maternal grandfather, Charles Hilligus, was a soldier in the Union Army during the Civil War. And in fact, Dad inherited the U.S. Army buckle from his grandfather. and that's kind of a family treasure that we keep. And his wife and Dad's grandma, her name was Hattie Hilligus. Dad had 3 brothers and a sister, Tom, Don, Geraldine, and Calvin. And Calvin died very young, very young. And Aunt Jerry is a surviving member of the family. Most of the family here know Aunt Jerry. She lives in Irvine with her husband, who's 101 years old, named Jerry. So, and Aunt Jerry, we talked to her, and so she sends her best. The young Palke kids on the farm, they grew up learning about hard work, and Dad always told me about that. Farming was tough through the Depression during the 1930s, but Dad had a knack for working with the tractor, horses, field equipment, crops, and farm animals. So Dad loved driving his Grandma Rose's mule team, 2 blind mules named Kate and Tilly. And so he would plow his grandma's garden with that and do some other things. He also fed the hogs, hand milked the cows, and every once in a while he'd give the cat a little squirt of fresh milk. So he thought that was a pretty good trick, and he enjoyed that. He also helped Grandma Rose on the home place, which is where the thing started, and he learned to drive there. He learned to drive in a rustic 1920s, I believe 24, touring car like the one you see on the Beverly Hillbillies. So it was a big old bus. But country life wasn't all work for Dad. He loved to play basketball. He played in the barnyard, and he played at school, and he played against his brother, Tom, and he was quite a basketball player. And incidentally, his brother, Tom, and his wife were the babysitters for Pat Riley when he was coach of the Lakers. So basketball kind of runs in the Palke family. So anyway, he enjoyed the warmth and comfort, really, of family gatherings, and that was kind of the focus of some of his special memories. Many Sundays after church, the relatives would come for miles for the Sunday dinner, for fellowship and fun afterwards. And that means especially youngsters like Dad and his mischievous cousins. They would, in the early days, they would roll metal wagon wheel covers with sticks and do tires and get into all kinds of trouble. But he remembers that also that his uncles and aunts brought musical instruments to play during these big family gatherings on Sunday. And he recalls his Uncle Charlie Went, who was a conductor on the Southern Pacific Railroad, always brought his fiddle and would play some snappy tunes. So that's kind of the family atmosphere he grew up with back on the farm. Around 1940, Dad, who was still in his teens, he moved to Los Angeles, followed soon by the rest of his family. He worked at the desk factory and at the shipyards during early World War II. Soon he met Shirley May Allen at church, Calvary Baptist Tabernacle, and we really hit it off, were Dad's words, and they became a couple then. On dates, young Bud and Shirley would go on picnics, to the mountains, to the beach. They liked to go to Knott's Ferry Farm because it was free back in the day, and to MacArthur Park for its rowboats. That was quite a treat back in the day to take your date out out on the rowboats. In a couple more years, Dad and Mom married, and that union lasted, as most of you know, 58 years. The next part, Dad had a really big interruption coming in his life next, and it changed his life forever. He was drafted into the U.S. Army in 1943 at age 19. And he was sent to boot camp at Camp Roberts, which is near San Luis Obispo, and it's still there. And in fact, some of the old World War II buildings are kind of there too. And he learned how to do his basic infantry things there. And one of the things that impressed me is back in the day when you were in Army boot camp, you had to crawl under these wires underneath live fire machine guns, you know, and I guess that learned the soldiers to get used to gunfire. He was assigned to the 33rd Infantry Division, the Golden Cross Division, and there's some pictures of him in the uniform and some more information in one of the little picture books. His travels with Uncle Sam took him to Hawaii, where he served shore guard duty there. Dutch East Indies, New Guinea, where he called doing mop-up, catching any, trying to capture any loose Japanese stragglers or anything like that. And then he went into combat on Luzon Island in the Philippines. That's the island where Manila is. As a mortar sergeant, Dad was twice wounded in action. One time, a mortar round went into his foxhole, and he was standing near actually it was the mortar pit. He was standing near the mortar. He didn't get it. He got hit in the head, but a couple of his squad mates were killed by that blast, and that kind of shook him up really bad. You know, when you lose a friend in the Army, especially that way, somebody that you've been with. And so the second time he was wounded was on the 1945 offensive that the United States was making against the Japanese up the Bilbao Mountains, and that's not too far from Manila. They were on a march. His unit was on a march to liberate a prisoner of war camp in Baguio City. He never did make it to the free the prisoners at the camp there, but his first sergeant made it, and he was awarded the Silver Star for that action. And of course, Dad was on his way to the hospital when they did that. But after he was wounded, it took stretcher bearers 4 hours to carry him up the hill to the first aid station, and that's a man on each pole of the stretcher. So up a hill. So it took them 4 hours to get there. And if you think about it, that's putting 4 guys out of combat too. So that's where a lot of the conscientious objectors in World War II that didn't want to, shoot and get involved in the shooting war, that's what they did. They worked and carried stretchers and did that sort of thing. So they were putting their lives on the line too, believe you me. So I found that quite interesting. So during the fierce fighting on the way to Baguio City, a burst of enemy machine guns hit him first on the top of one shoe and boot and scraped his foot, and then a couple of shells, maybe 2 or 3, went into his leg. And so he was flown by Piper Cub to the Army Hospital in the Philippines after they got him up the hill. And then when he was stabilized, he was sent to a hospital in Modesto, California. And for Pam's dad, who lives in Modesto, they were exchanging comments about old Modesto. Dad spent 3 years in Army hospitals to recover from his wounds, mostly at Letterman General in the Presidio in San Francisco. He walked with a built-up shoe and a slight limp for the rest of his life, but while it wasn't a $1 million wound, he came out alive, and he really made do with what he had there. And that wound caused him problems all his life, but he made do. He was awarded the Bronze Star and 2 Purple Hearts, and they can be seen over there with his other military decorations on the table. For a while, Shirley rented a room in San Francisco to be near Dad as he convalesced. They were married on August 3, 1945. So I was born September 1948, and my brother John, September 1951. In Southern California, we lived in the city of Compton first, which has a little bit different reputation now. And we lived in Los Angeles to be near my grandparents, Henry and Della. And then we lived in Torrance near the ocean, and that's where I graduated from high school. Tell you a little about growing up. Dad and Mom took John and me on lots of trips to national parks, Death Valley, Yosemite, and Yellowstone, and we were camping in these parks. So I can remember floating on an air mattress down the cold Tuolumne River, and we were in a tent, and there were bears working the campground there, and so Dad was trying to make a little noise to scare them away, and he had this old tent, what was it, maybe 10 by 10, the old canvas kind, with a pole up the middle, we'd all sleep around like in a square, That was kind of fun for a kid, and I'm sure fun for them too, but Mom always the worry was, oh, Bud, oh, Bud. But, So we took lots of trips across the country, and of course we had lots of relatives across the states, so that made it a little easier to travel when we could stop and visit and maybe sleep and eat for free. So on a side note though, this is a true fact about Dad. He had the amazing ability, and I mean amazing, to read a map and plot a course anywhere. Just had a real talent at that sort of thing, in numbers and figures and mathematics and things like that. And if he'd been somewhere, by golly, he did not need a map. He could get there, you know. So that was always things. So he really had an uncanny sense of direction, and I was really amazed by that all my life. We did lots of camping and boating growing up, often at the Colorado River for fishing and water skiing. And Dad was pretty good on water skis, always on the 2 skis, because that's what he learned on, and with the fishing rod, of course, which many of you know. Dad was the most patient guy fishing, and when I say patient, I mean patient. I always got a little bit antsy sitting in the boat or on the dock, you know. Okay, when's this going to wrap up, you know? But he was persistent, and he sat there, you know, and it all, lots of times, mostly, paid off with a stringer full of fish. So, you know, patience pays off in fishing. Dad, as most of you know, had 3 boats in his lifetime and was still fishing and deer hunting. And he went to deer hunting with Shirley's husband many, many times. So, and he was doing that until his 80s. So he liked to do that, and he did it as long as his health would permit. So that was good. Growing up, Mom and Dad watched us play Little League Baseball. They took us to Dodger games, and Dad helped me buy my first surfboard. He went down there and helped me pick it out, and you'll get a kick out of this. He made sure that I didn't have any stringer with a slashed grain in it, so it would be weak, you know. And so he helped me with the surfboard, and then both Mom and Dad helped me buy my first car. It was a '58 Chevy, and I paid like something like, this was in the mid-'60s, something like $780 for it, you know, which was a lot, but pretty cheap if you think about it, you know. So my mom, she, you know, always made me pay her money to make sure that car was paid for. You know, she collected rent. My mom did. As soon as I got a job, she started collecting rent, you know. But the money, it wound up in my account. Anyway, you know, and so when I wanted to buy that car, I had a good down, and then we put the touch on Grandma, and she loaned me the rest, you know. Yeah. So Mom and Dad also saw that John and I had piano lessons, and I think I took them a little longer than John, but we did all right though. And so Dad was a cabinet maker by trade, and he was foreman when we lived in Southern California of South Bay Cabinets in Hermosa Beach, California, which is on the beach city and not too far from where we lived in Torrance. After I graduated from high school in 1966, the family moved to West Salem. After a while, Dad and Mom's brother-in-law Ed, they became partners and opened Allen and Palke Cabinets. That was a custom cabinet shop, in other words, built to order. And they had clients throughout Oregon, some in Idaho and Washington and wherever they had it. And many homes still have the custom-made Allen and Palke cabinets in the South Bay. I think they retired, what, in 85, 86, something like that?
Yeah, about 86.
Yeah, and
85.
This man here, he worked for Dad and Ed in Allen and Palke cabinets, so that's nice that someone from the work days came. I sure appreciate that. And when Mom and Dad moved to Oregon, they blossomed. I mean, they just blossomed. It was like they were made to live in Oregon. They planted vegetable gardens each year with hundreds, and I mean hundreds of square feet of corn, beans, squash, and berries. They had apple, pear, and prune trees, and of course that meant a lot of home canning work. So Mom would can some, and then the stuff like the corn, they'd take it over to, I think that's 12th Street or 13th Street. Blundell's was a canning kitchen there, and you could take your corn in there, and they'd can it for you. You do all the work. Dad, and often with John, when they moved up to Oregon, he often went duck hunting and fishing, and they went as often as possible. And By that time, I was serving in the Navy. A little later, they joined the North Santiam Sportsman Club at Detroit Lake, and his old jacket is over there with the logo. He had a dedicated camping spot and a dock, and they were set, of course, then for many, many, many years of fun involving us and the grandchildren and lots of friends and guests. Like George used to come up there, and the grandkids would come up to the Sportsman's Club once in a while, and so that was wonderful. And also another important change in his life, he acquired his beloved Chesapeake Bay Retriever Clyde. And that dog was always by his side. It was kind of a one-man dog, if you will. At the same time, my aunt and uncle also purchased a Chesapeake Bay Retriever from the same litter, and they called the dog Bonnie. So we had Bonnie and Clyde there. In fact, there's a picture of Dad up there on this panel on the left-hand side of Dad with Bonnie and Clyde in the kennel there. So they got a big kick out of naming the dogs that, you know. I think that the cabinet shop was also growing, especially in the late 70s and the early 80s before the recession slowed things down. And they developed a reputation for quality woodworking, and then they both retired, as we say, in the mid-80s. And they worked for probably a whole year getting their building after that in suitable shape to sell. So that was good. And as you know, many of you know, Dad was always a bird lover, and he built feeders and nesting boxes way back into California. But he bought them for all three of their homes in West Salem. And he built boxes, nesting boxes and feeders for all three of their homes in West Salem. And so that when they took their camping trips with the motorhome or with the camper, Dad liked to play country music on his cassette player in the car, and he liked to sing with the country music. And he didn't sing too much, but Dad was a very good singer. I remember him singing in the shower when I was a kid, you know, and then he would sing little songs and little ditties and like that, you know. And so that was something that a lot of people didn't know, that he was a pretty good singer.
And took a shower with them, though.
They both love to, Mom and Dad both love to explore new places across the country. Many times they went with Ed and Ann and things like that, which is Mom's brother and his wife. And as I might tell you, Dad and Mom, as many of you know, were very generous people. They helped me with the down payment on my first house. And through the years, they helped John and I with much appreciated financial assistance. And Dad shared many of his work skills with family and friends. And I can remember him sharing his work skills with Kevin, working on different projects, bicycles and ramps and wood. And he would help Kevin secure wood here and there for his projects. So Dad liked being involved. And I think when Daryl over there took the golf ball in the backyard and shanked it through the window there, Dad and Sue helped get that thing fixed and going again. Before Daddy got home, by the way. Oh, I try to include everyone. So the other thing that I think is real notable is that Dad, he loved to barbecue. And man, we had lots of sausage, big thick steaks, you know, it cost you about $6-7 a piece now, you know, they'd throw those on there and everything. Denise probably would go, "Where's the chicken nowadays?" But so that was good. And he loved to barbecue, and John barbecued in the backyard.
In one of his places, he built a barbecue.
That's right. That's right. And as most of you know, Dad had a real good sense of humor. He's a very funny guy, very, very droll, and very, very funny. And he had a lot of sayings, and I'll be darned if I don't use a good portion of them myself. And I think some of them have even crept through to my children. So, Grandpa Bud, you know, nuts don't fall too far from the tree, I guess. But I really miss Dad greatly. he was the most influential man in my life, and he taught me so much. And I admired his strength and his ability really to overcome adversity. He had so much adversity in his life, including issues with alcohol. And believe me, that is not, Sue helped him with that. And that there's not, that's really something hard to overcome. And I can only imagine the horrors that he went through and the horrors that he experienced during World War II, having people shoot at you and vice versa, and all the carnage and everything that he saw. And so I just want to say that I love you, Dad, and I'm glad you were in my life. And in closing, I would like to invite any of you who have any thoughts or any funny stories or any stories that they'd like to share about Grandpa Bud or Dad. Now is the time. Please feel free to do so. Thank you.
So I just wanted to start writing down all the things that made me think of Grandpa, and I got a lot of them here, so just take it away. So I remember him sharing his woodworking projects with us, and I thought that was a lot of fun. The one I distinctly remember was him building that little windmill that was a man sawing a log. Camping was one of our pastimes, and at some point, I don't know if it was always there when we would go to the lodge, but he brought the motor home, and there was always an escape to something that felt like we weren't camping, even though we weren't ever really camping. We had trailers and
outdoor living.
Outdoor living, yeah. We had a beautiful deck, trailers, and, but the motorhome was always our escape. The one thing that I remember most about camping was the Visqueen. I still don't know what that is, if that's a name or if that's a thing, but that was always a big deal. At one point, when I was 12 or something, Grandpa and Grandma took me on a trip to Canada. Just me, though. Didn't make any sense at the time. I don't know what I did at home. They weren't sending me off to Canada, but it was a great trip. Picking blueberries with Grandpa was... I think I can get through all these. Huh?
That was wonderful.
There's like 30.
So picking blueberries with Grandpa and struggling to fill a single pail.
You ate them all. Yeah.
Introducing me to the world's best snack, frozen blueberries with milk. Never was bold enough to use half and half like Grandpa. His letting us know that figs actually existed in a form other than a Newton variety. Same for rhubarb, still don't know what it is. Grandpa grows weird things. Grandpa's shoes. As a kid, I was fascinated that one leg was shorter than the other. Introducing us to venison jerky. Using the bathroom in the garage. How a toilet seat could get so cold. If anyone really used corn to wipe. Staring at the bosom babes on the wall and wondering why anyone needs rubber pants up to their armpits. The boat in Detroit Lake, taking turns going out on the boat with the sea fog. The rare fishing trip that I was never really allowed to go due to being so easily bored. Going into the trailer or the motorhome when it was parked back in Grandpa's shop. It always felt so wrong to not exit and be at the lake. His love for birds and squirrels and his hate for the biggest threat, smart house cats. Grandpa buying one of those school fundraiser seed packs like a good grandpa, planting it and watching it grow and grow for years. A nice little 10 by 10 square off to the side of the house that he let loose. The best day of summer, bringing the trailer up to the lake, and the saddest, parking it back at his shop. Tools on his workbench as a kid, putting things in vices and hammering. Breaking Dad's double pane windows with the world's worst cooking golf swing from Dad's backyard, only to have Grandpa come save the day and fix it. Same with the front door when I broke the glass, knocking hard because Denise locked me out for fun.
I haven't started.
Being able to spot Grandpa's Suburban from a mile away, it was the hubcaps. The job in the house at get-together at Grandpa and Grandma's, preparing the soda tray, stuck in the ones I liked. Barks, it's got bite. Being surprised at how much food the dining room table could hold at said get-togethers. His willingness to loan out the trailer for various needs as we got older. Nap time on a lazy Sunday. Being late for our wedding, and Holly having no problem waiting. That was surprising to me, given the run-up. Lastly, his famous saying, "Don't forget, you're a Palke."
Oh.
The other thing that amazed me is recently I've gotten into a lot of woodworking, and I look back on the days that I used to store my quads over in his workshop. And I'd go in there and he had so much woodworking stuff, and I'm like, gosh, what does he do with all this? It's amazing how much stuff he had. And it was all great, cool stuff to me. And we were talking about that. I was like, well, geez, if I would have got into some of this stuff I'm doing now, I could have helped them get rid of some of that stuff into my garage, because I could have put great use to it.
I regret not taking it too.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm sure Kevin is the same way, because we're kind of in the same boat. But he was just a great guy. I mean, you could tell he cared a lot about his family.